Good day, listeners and viewers of Beyond the Checkbox. My name is Ryan Todd. I'm the host, where we learn about putting mental health resources into your organization through frontline leaders. Today's podcast, we had a very cool guest. Her name was Krista Pell, and she is the VP HR of a well-known energy company called Cenovus in Calgary, Alberta. Well, headquartered in Calgary anyway. So what do you do when your company goes from 3,000 people to 9,000 people? That's what happened when a little company called Cenovus bought another little company called Husky. And Krista, it was put on her desk and the HR team to make this merger happen after the fact, after the papers were signed. So that perspective is very unique. Of course, Krista is a very high-level athlete in CrossFit. So that was cool to get that perspective as well, because her personal wellness and CrossFit and how she competes ties into this very stressful, very big job that she has. We were excited to have Krista on the show, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so you started just before, essentially a month or two before the pandemic.
2 months before the pandemic.
The company was 3,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for those, most of us know what Cenovus is. For those who don't, tell us a little bit about the organization and kind of the reach of it and what the main industry is.
Yeah, so integrated energy company, which really means that, and maybe I'll go back a little bit prior to that, to the acquisition of Husky.
Yeah.
It really was solely focused in Western Canada oil sands and doing different types, but primarily conventional and then oil sands.
Yeah.
And then with Husky, it got a whole lot more diverse. So now we have refineries. So they call that downstream assets. So refineries really in the US and in Canada. And then we have offshore operations in just offshore of China, Malaysia, so Asia Pacific, Newfoundland. And then, of course, we grew more of that conventional gas business and the oil sands business.
So within 2 years, your workforce went from 3,000 to what now?
About 9,000.
So it tripled, and not like 3 to 9, like you added 6,000 people.
Yeah. So basically, when the transaction occurred with Husky and Cenovus, there was we were over 3, so we were 3 plus. They were 7 plus, and so then there was some downsizing last year, where the synergies occurred, and we're about 9. Yeah.
Wow.
It's busy.
Yeah. So take us through that, because there's in the industries that I'm most familiar with, that fluctuation in staff is normal. We work with construction companies that double or half, just seemingly on a whim. Obviously, there's a lot of that goes into it, years of work. And I think our listeners would benefit from knowing what that is like and how you've dealt with that and how your company has dealt with it on the HR side.
Yeah. Well, this one's really different. And I previously was in a role similar where project management, construction, you're 0 to 10,000 if you need to be. And the reason this one's slightly different is you can imagine both companies, Cenovus and Husky, had their practices, had their, compensation methods.
Were they wildly different or mostly?
So one of the terms we've been using lately is the devil's in the details. No, on paper, they were very similar. Both followed, both were Canadian-based, energy companies.
Yeah.
However, when you start to dig deeper, it is in the little things, right? So you and I are drinking coffee right now. I think you're drinking coffee.
This is a water.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's
very
pretend.
Deceiving, though.
Let's pretend we're drinking.
Our viewers, it's very deceiving.
Yeah, so you and I are drinking coffee. We're like, oh yeah, we're both coffee drinkers. But it only takes standing in line at a Starbucks or anywhere to say how different are those coffee drinkers, right?
Yeah.
I might be a double shot dark roast
What do you
espresso.
have?
Well, normally I would be just like my normal go-to order. Currently, it's like a dark roast with almond milk. I went off almond milk for a long time, but now I'm back on the almond milk. I usually like a black coffee, but I find that's a bit much.
That's a phenotype of coffee drinker, the black coffee drinker.
Really?
Yeah, that's like it means you're more, I don't know, like hardcore or something.
But I'm not like a hardcore coffee. Honestly, it probably has to do with because I don't like cream at all. So until the whole almond milk, and I don't like oat. I'm obsessed by cashew milk. Sorry, randomly for your listeners. Cashew milk is the nut milk.
What doesn't
choice.
make milk? At this point, every nut or vegetable
Oat.
makes milk.
I know, like
or grain, they all make milk.
like oat is literally like, and I was having conversations. And I was like, so if I squeeze my oatmeal, and I'm like, milk. What is
Comes
that?
right out of it.
Anyway, yeah. So, but think about that mindset, right? So, really similar, and because kind of culturally, we primarily based in Calgary, so compensation similar, culturally leadership similar, but then different. I mean, and probably the biggest difference, I think, really rooted in how old are these companies like Husky, very old. That sounds wrong. But, kind of in that 50-year mark, and then Cenovus about 10. So that's probably, even if, even if you were to say, well, they're all really similar, like even culturally, that just changes things, right?
Yeah. That's an interesting thing is that, like, we talk about culture and no one can really define it, but there's a feeling there. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's similar to like coffee drinkers, like pure black coffee drinkers, or maybe they feel different than someone who has a latte. And what were the cultural differences? Like, how do you see that show up in a major merger and growth?
Yeah. So you really see it in how decisions are made.
Yeah.
I think that's one for sure, where like, is there an expectation of, kind of we use the term stakeholder, like you're going to stakeholder it around the table a lot, then you're going to roll it out in a specific sequence, and then you're going to get your decision? Or is it going to be very much like a command and control type decision? This is what we're going to do. The people in charge of it are going to make that decision. They will choose how they roll it out. So that's definitely one.
What is it now? Like, what's the culture now with it, do you think?
Well, I think it's still evolving and emerging. I mean, the leadership, the executive team leadership was largely a Cenovus leadership. Yeah. So a lot more, I'll say agile, nimble in that decision making.
Like Cenovus acquired Husky.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a merger.
We treat it like a merger.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really important. So we often, I'll say in the office, because we are just getting ourselves back in there now. Cool. But we speak about it, we'll interchange merger, acquisition, transaction, all of those words. Merger because of this. Cenovus was smaller, and we weren't in a place from a operational perspective to run Husky. So there was no point in considering that you were acquiring. Yeah. Like if you were going to go in and acquire, not that you can't merge and kind of integrate and harmonize, what you're doing. Yeah. So if we just said talent development, right? That's a very soft, easy one. But we could have just said, nope, you're going to follow what Cenovus is doing. But we didn't have the program structure to do that. So that's why we talk a lot about it is we wanted to consider it a merger from how we looked at things because that was really how we were going to be successful.
You can't really acquire a workforce that's double yours as well, procedurally.
Right. I mean, the only way I think you could is if, from an HR perspective, is if you were really all in the same city, country area. Sure. Right. And you were really just adding on more headcount. Yeah. But that was not what happened. Yeah. And so there was really, to your point, you can't, acquire double your size and then just think it's all going to run the same. And that's why I'm like, the culture is still emerging because the Cenovus, the roots of the Cenovus culture was what we went in with, but there are practicalities that just don't exist.
Did it change the game now that it's more international?
Big time. Big time. And I can think of two really, really baseline examples. So one, when we did this, when the transaction happened, everybody was working from home. almost globally all
That's
working
another
from
layer
home.
of complexity.
So it actually made it a lot easier.
Really?
Yes. And here's
Interesting.
why. Because it really didn't matter where you were based then, right? So I can
Okay.
comfortably call a director of HR in Hong Kong as much as I can call someone that's sitting in St. John's or they're sitting in Calgary. It's pretty easy. There's some time zone pieces in there, but easy. But I had something come to light last week is we were having a leadership day and we were planning for it. And all of a sudden someone's like, well, is it a hybrid day? And we're like, no, it's going to be in person. And they're like, okay, well, are you flying folks out of Hong Kong, out of Shaku, and yes, people had thought about it, but they hadn't really,
Yeah.
you could see the like,
oh.
I guess so. Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess we are. So those nuances really will change a culture that's quite comfortable with, at first, walking down the hall to find someone,
Yeah.
then thinking everybody's on their time zone, then to even like, how do I pull an in-person meeting together if I want it?
Yeah. It's changed the game so much in how we interact.
Yeah.
And like we're coming back to the office now too. And some things are way easier and some things are like kind of the same. So I don't know. I think everything's going to be hybrid. Like
I think they
that,
should be.
It will be from now on.
Yeah.
Especially if somebody's like there's, I don't know if it's impacted sick days or I know it's probably impacted short-term disability, but sick days are almost like they're less of a thing.
Mhm.
You stay home, but like, if you have like a mild cold and you can still work, you stay home and kind of do the work.
Yeah, we actually had to have a bit of put the firm foot down recently over that because we actually had people, COVID is obviously a big word, but people get COVID and they're still online working from home. And I'm like, okay, if you have a sniffle, hey, no problem. But at the end of the day, if you're sick, go be sick. I hate to say it, but go take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And we just saw people that were like, oh, I'm just at home, so I'll work anyway. And so that is something I think just from certainly from a health and safety perspective, but also from a mindset perspective, like what's really best for people is to take care of themselves. And that's, we saw that starting to happen where people are just so used to working from home and it's easy to grab your laptop or, go into your office or do wherever you work from home. And we're really not taking the time to heal.
Has that, does that change? Is there cultural nuances to that? How, sites in Newfoundland or like off the coast of China is wellness considered differently? Like, do you find there's cultural nuances there?
I do. Yeah. I think, I'll interchangeably talk about maybe wellness and also like employee, like psychological safety as well.
Yeah.
So emerging in Asia, not at the same space we are here, but definitely emerging. We've had 2 or 3 really key indicators where, they're not as far lagging as they would have lagged from North America, kind of just cultural and COVID has changed that.
Yeah.
Working from home as an option has changed some of that. Even just the stigmatism around mental health. Still a little or a lot different, probably from China to Canada.
Sure.
But if we get into some of the other Asian countries, it's, kind of probably not as wide of a gap.
Yeah.
Is
psychological safety, is that being talked about in the Asia Pacific? That's a topic that's coming up more and more?
It's starting to emerge. Yeah. So we just did a leader series over the last few weeks in our China, for our China leaders on emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And so these are the, kind of the entry points into those conversations where, 5 years ago, I'll say 5 years ago, that would have never, 5 years ago would have never happened.
Yeah.
So.
Is it lagging? Like, first of all, how are you measuring it? And then how do you measure it like differently in different countries? I imagine there's not like hard metrics yet.
No, if we're talking about psychological safety,
Yeah.
no. I mean, there's a number of soft indicators where we start to look at, and I use some pretty pinpoint data. So if we use let's say our employee or staff engagement survey or our self-identification surveys, participation is the number one indicator
Okay.
in psychological safety. Now, is it a perfect science? No. But if you think about engagement and feeling like you can be your true self at work and that you're in a safe spot,
Yeah.
you're more apt to participate and disclose.
Okay.
Right? Because
Okay.
you're in a place
Yep.
of, I feel comfortable, I feel safe, I
Yep.
feel I can speak my piece and that I don't have to hide. Now, we're in a new organization where we're now trending different numbers and looking at different things, but that's usually one of the key indicators that we'll look for is just participation.
And did you see a difference in Husky Cenovus in that concept, that construct? Like the question I'd be really interested in is, it is for sure dependent on the company and the culture of that company, but it's also a bit dependent on like the gestalt of a region. Like Western Canadian based companies probably consider psychological safety in a similar-ish way.
Yep.
So
Yeah. So yes, I would say that there are differences.
yeah.
So, Husky did a really great job of what we call the self-identification survey.
Yeah.
Cenovus didn't have one. Flip side is Cenovus did a really great job of engagement surveys and querying employees on, engagement surveys, and Husky didn't do them. So it's hard for me to kind of compare apples to apples. Yeah. But there was a different culture at Husky around probably just comfortably disclosing. Husky was owned by does have Asian owners or did have Asian owners, and that will create a certain different disclosure comfort just based on the culture that brought forward.
For you in energy, why is that important? Psychological safety. Like I have my own ideas about it. It's interesting to know from your perspective. Why is that being put at the forefront? Why is that an important concept?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is, I can pull psychological right to physical safety, but I think a few things. One is we want people to be their best authentic selves when they're working, no matter where they are. It's an office-based statement. This is be your authentic self because we're gonna get the best out of you. We're gonna have the opportunity to get the best out of you. When you put that mindset into a safety-sensitive role, I absolutely want people to speak up when there are safety concerns. And so I always think about, and I'm going to it's like the Costa ship that ran amok in Italy. I don't know how many years ago that was now, but there's a nuance around this around why do you not want the captain steering the ship? And why do you want the first lieutenant steering the ship? And I don't know if you've heard this before, but because the first lieutenant is traditionally going to be fearful to correct the captain. Now, you don't want that. You want to change that environment. However, putting the first lieutenant, or I might be getting, the first something.
The Navy boat hierarchy.
Whatever the first person is, the putting them steering allows the captain to course correct.
Yeah. Okay.
If you need. So I bring this up, which is kind of a nuanced statement, but what we want is for everybody to feel comfortable. Sure. Raising concern, being their best self, being authentic. And so that psychologically safety, that feeling of belonging and inclusion will allow you to more comfortably speak up.
Is there fear that like the pendulum will swing? Like everyone will start disclosing everything at all times and there's just going to be too much like disclosure of
That's a good
stuff.
question.
So I think I've talked about it before, but when I worked in Fort McMurray, there was a very particular safety meeting I was at, and I was young. Like it was in my early 20s. It was before medical school. I'm sure I've talked about it on this podcast, so I apologize to like mostly McSteve, who has probably heard this story like 8 times, and he's like, "Oh, this story again." We had a stand down meeting because there was like a bunch of little injuries that happened, and the leader of the group, and there was like 400 of us in this room, and we all had to go home early, and the leader said, "You have to disclose these small injuries."
Yep.
Like you have to, but if you do, we go home early. So it was like this completely dialectic statement that
because then
shut it down in a way, and so it left me thinking like I don't know what to do here. If there's a small, no one knew what to do.
Well, and even things like, injury reporting, sorry, and injuries, right? If, they, depending on how people are compensation, like they're incentivized compensation wise, it can be a pro or a con.
People are incented to be more safe.
Correct.
But maybe incented to not disclose injuries?
No, well, you don't know. I mean, what I'm saying is people are incented to have a good safety rating.
Yeah.
And so if they're concerned that in disclosing these small things that could somehow happen, what is the culture you're driving, right?
Yeah.
Is it a culture of disclosure for constant improvement and safety is our number one priority? But these are the things that we come across. I hate to say I'm not saying all the time, but we'll come across them. A leader saying like, no, we're going to tuck that away because we don't want to disclose a safety concern or,
or you're on like a streak.
I'm comfortable to say we don't have that happening, but, human nature is human nature, right? People are going to do things. So to your point around, am I concerned that by saying like everybody share everything, I think that's the only way that we can constantly improve. Like, isn't that what we want? We want to be able to focus on the right things. We want people to feel empowered that they can correct. And I think it's less about just, I'm going to bring forward a concern and we're never going to correct it. It's more about like, okay, well, how can you empowering people to also, course correct, make improvements, make sure that we are delivering not only the best product, but like the safest environment. Safety number one.
Do they still have those boards on sites that are like
a health and safety board?
No.
Yes, we do.
Yes, by a lot. Like those boards that have like the thing that says we are 45 million work hours without a safety incident.
Yeah, I mean, there's different sites have different things.
But that appears to be like a thing that you're like, oh, don't disclose the injury because we're gonna mess up the like scoreboard.
Yeah, but I think it's what you do when you disclose that, right?
Yeah.
So you either, and I wouldn't never say celebrate, but you either like, you recognize that maybe it was a courageous moment to, to disclose that, but there's an opportunity for us to learn and improve. Have you ever heard the story? Sorry, no, I'm like hosting. I'm going to ask you a question.
That's good.
Have you ever heard the story of the executive who introduced New Coke? Now, you might be too young for that. Do you know what
New Coke?
If I say New Coke, does that make any sense?
I didn't know there was an old Coke. So like Coca-Cola?
Yes, Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola, and I'm going to get the years wrong.
Was it like the Coca-Cola to Coke?
Yes.
Transition?
So basically what happened was there was Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Pepsi was starting to eat their lunch a little.
Yeah.
I don't know the story why of that. And then, so let's say CEO, executive table, like, what are we going to do differently?
Mm-hmm.
And someone put up their hand and said, well, what I think we could do is change our packaging, kind of the New Coke, kind of maybe they had a flavor change. I don't exactly know that point.
Yeah.
But basically this executive came forward and was like, I think we should do this. So it'd be like, hey, we're the New Coke. Right? Almost like I'm trying to think of something more recent, but I'll go with this story. And so executive stands up, New Coke, they put millions into this, they launch it, and it flops. All right? Then people are like, New Coke, I want old Coke. What are you talking about? Coke, Coca-Cola, what?
Yeah.
So two things happened. One, what do you think happened to the executive that went all in on that?
I don't know, like traditional thinking, he got fired.
Traditional thinking is, right? And certainly, and this was in the 80s, so certainly traditionally you think. Instead, that CEO did two things. One, like public promotion and public praise for having the courage to come forward with a new idea when no other executive would put their neck on the line to do that.
Yeah.
And secondly, allowed that individual to then launch Coca-Cola Classic, which is what we drink today. And really allowed.
So they like rebranded the rebrand to just go back to old.
Yeah. And then Coca-Cola Classic ate Pepsi for lunch. But the whole point being that we so often penalize what can be perceived as a mistake or a failure instead of rewarding it.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that's the thing is, again, that's a bit of a circumvented story, but it's how you respond to when things go, or how as leaders we respond to when things don't go perfectly. And someone has the courage to say, I don't think this is right.
Yeah.
Right. So whenever I think of psychological safety, I want someone to bring forward their concern. Now, it doesn't mean that, it's really, what do you do with that then? Do you allow them the opportunity to go and try and correct and fix? Do we suddenly have a pattern? Is it a, an indicator of something? Does it give, I'll say me as a leader an opportunity to then go and ask, well, hey, if you're seeing that, let's go dig a little bit. And is it more, something more prevalent? So I never want to say like celebrate or reward something that's gone wrong as much as like there's context in there, but
to celebrate
the courageousness.
Yeah.
The courageousness.
Yeah.
Courageousness.
Yeah.
That somebody's like, wow, I didn't know if I should bring this forward.
Yeah. To me, that strikes a chord with psychological safety. That's what I think. That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're not punishing. Yeah, Elon Musk talks about this a lot. Like I saw a YouTube clip where he was talking about how he hires, and the group hires. They hire if someone has done something exceptional in their life, and they fire if somebody's not trying new things and not like disclosing the mistakes. They're just kind of status quo. And I mean, it's a highly innovative company. That makes a lot of sense. I wonder if that gets harder as the company gets bigger. Like I know with a smaller group, it's probably easier to disclose and innovate. Do you think, have you seen that get harder as your company tripled?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things that get harder. One is, specifically too, if you're a public company, which, many of the larger ones are, where you're really trying to, kind of, you've got shareholder expectations to meet. So constant innovation is not reasonable.
And disruption. You can't just can't.
You're in constant change agent mode, right? So you've got to so I think, in the size and scale matter a lot. And also the amount of resources, financial as much as even just like psychological resources for change. I think right now too, I mean, we were having this conversation recently about we are in an absolute change. Like the last 2 years, no matter where you were or what you did, you're in change.
Yeah.
So recently, just last week, we were with my leadership team talking about and now we throw a Cenovus Husky on top of that change.
In the middle of the change.
In the middle of the change, we got more change. So people have change fatigue. Those who embrace change, I'm a comfortable change agent. So when I start to feel change fatigue, I'm like, I can't even imagine how those who are uncomfortable with change are feeling right now.
Yeah.
Because that must be absolutely overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I think when you start to talk about innovation right now, one, there is a core group of people or group, no matter what your organization is, that need to still be innovating.
Yeah.
But whether you have an organization innovating or you have a smaller group, that's going to really be determined by where your organization is in its journey.
Yeah.
So you're never not moving things ahead, but you can't always be evolving. You can't be changing your strategy or evolving your big plans every 18 months.
Yeah. It's 9,000. It's tough to pivot 9,000 people.
Yep, exactly.
With billions of dollars of assets and shareholder expectations. And,
and also think about, I think about the employment experience, right? If you're I'm going to work at Cenovus because this is their value proposition, A, B, C, D, E. And if you're constantly changing it, you actually never have a chance to experience it. Right now, there's a lot of us going through home renovations or buying new houses. And so we use this. We're always no, we're going to have to live in the house for a while. No painting walls, no moving walls. You got to go live in the house. Stop redecorating.
Yeah, there's probably a COVID redecorating renovation spree.
There is.
Yeah.
Well, people changing their space, right? Because they were working from home. We did it. Now, we were looking at moving before COVID hit, but then it only took a few months the house was not designed for 3 people to be working from home.
You said you have a home gym?
I do.
Okay.
That was a big, that was a material reason why we moved.
It's a big part of your life, fitness
is.
and you've mentioned before it helps keep you well. And I imagine throughout the change, it has been ultimately important.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I don't know, you're the doctor, not me, but I would say like everybody needs to have things that I always say is a chemical release, right? Like they ground them.
Yeah.
And I call it it's like my, oh, not Ferris Bueller. My goodness. It's all right. I'll come back to who I was going to say. Forrest Gump. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's like my Forrest Gump. Why does Forrest Gump get up and run? Because he's trying to rebalance himself.
Yeah.
Right. It's not because he wanted to go for however far he ran. He just decided he needed to go reset. So we all have a need to do that.
Yeah.
And many people choose different things that ground them, and absolutely working out is mine.
It seems to be more than just grounding for you, though. Like you compete.
I do compete.
And
yes.
it's a big part of your life, competing in CrossFit. So
Yeah.
is it only grounding, or like it probably gives you a lot of meaning, you've been so successful in it too?
I think it gives me a few things. One is actually, this is most people who know me in that world will say, like, I will literally be signed up for the next thing before I've even kind of finished competing in one. And I'm very, like, I need to know what the next thing is. I'm not very good at just doing something.
Or being in the moment with it, you mean?
Yeah. Well, no, more of like, if I say whether it's fitness or work, like I either need to know the strategy I'm driving towards or the North Star, like here's where I'm going and here's my plan. Like there is nothing that makes me happier than starting a new program or plan. I love it. I'm so bought into it. And it's not actually about the competing day. For me, it's about following the program, following the plan, and really being that element of, and I'll say discipline, but it's not about being disciplined as much as it's like, I like to see the result. I like to follow it and see the result.
So you enjoy the process of
love the process
of the competition even more so than the actual competition?
100%.
Yeah.
300%.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's very exact. That's an exact number.
I love the process. Love it, love it, love it. I think it's so fun. I love the training.
There's something too about like physical pain that is like cathartic in working out in like the whole dopamine endorphin situation.
Yeah.
And CrossFit is and at the level you compete at, it's quite painful, I imagine.
It is, yeah. And I was just sharing with you before, like I find that we're back in office now and I'm out of sync. I mean, for 2 years, basically, had a gym in the house, would do that either morning, noon, night, doesn't matter what it is. And the last month of driving back downtown has got me all in a race. So I've got to sort myself out.
Yeah.
Last night I was driving home and I was like, I actually bailed on the gym because I was like, I'm not in a place to go into that pain cave. Like I was so tired coming home. Yeah. And that's often why I don't like working out at night, because when you know you're going to kind of go all in on something like that, your psychology that you need to be half asleep, you don't know you're doing it, or you're got to feel a bit fresh, right?
Yeah.
So to go at like 6:00 at night after a long day I don't have the mental fortitude, and I should have just gone. I was being a slacker.
Yeah, it feels like the mountain's just a little taller.
Yeah. So I'm not good at working out after noon, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I like the morning workout. You just do it.
Just
get it done.
Mindless.
Yeah.
So right now we're renovating in the house. So I've got a bike, like a spin bike, sitting literally in our upstairs like bedroom. And this morning my husband, like I literally rolled out of bed basically in my pajamas and put my shoes on and just got on the bike and started like going. And he's like, nice workout outfit. I was like, I need to get my head wrapped around working out in the morning again. Yeah. Like I think that's going to end up being. And so this morning I was like, no, if you go and try and change and get ready, you're not going to commit to this. Just literally jump on that bike.
Because you've been so successful in competing, do you and you're in HR, I imagine people look up to that and it like sets the tone, a bit of a culture of wellness. Have you found that there to be a trickle down effect with that?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people know that I value them getting their time and having their space. Right now we're rolling out, started yesterday, a hybrid work schedule or
Okay.
model or
Yeah.
program. People call it different things, where people can flex home. We've always had a flex in and out time, but like you can flex home a couple days a week.
Yeah.
We're coming back to the office. So for me, I want people to be able to be their best selves. And
Yeah.
I know for me, like this is my, what's my perfect scenario, right? You get to dream it out. Like I would love to go work for a few hours, go work out for an hour or two, and then work again. Right? So if
Yeah.
someone came to
Are
me,
you able to do that? Do you do that?
I don't right now.
Yeah.
No.
That's not an easy schedule to carry, but yeah.
No, because I'm downtown. Like this is
Yeah.
why I think if I'm like, okay, how do I sort this a little bit better? How do I maybe a couple of days a week? There's lots of gyms that are like, 2 seconds from the office.
Yeah.
Do a couple of midday workouts, right? So that's actually where I am right now. Is like I don't like the 5:30 a.m. workout. It makes me grumpy. So, or I roll out of bed in my pajamas and work out. But yeah, so I do think that people understand that I value that.
Yeah.
And I value it for them.
Yeah.
Whatever they need and want to do, I value it for them.
How do you bridge like you being in HR, like the bulk of your workforce is in the field.
Mhm.
And also the bulk of your workforce you'll never really meet. Like thousands of people who work with you, for you in the organization you'll never meet. How do you consider that and bridge that, specifically because it's an industrial type workplace where your lifestyle is not necessarily the lifestyle that you live if you are working offshore in China, for example?
Mhm.
It's an impossible question. I just want to get some of your thoughts and perspectives around it. How do you try and bridge that, especially when it comes to wellness and exercise and psychological safety and mental health, these things that you hold near and dear? How do you make sure those translate and get across to the field?
Well, I think I'll answer it a couple ways. One is I do my best to actually try and get to all of our sites.
Yeah.
It's been a weird couple of years, but back on track. Here we go. I value that so much.
Yeah.
Because it really helps me to be able to say, oh my gosh, we can't do that, right? Or we can do that, or this would help, or it wouldn't help. I spent a few days up in Lloydminster in the fall. I was out in Newfoundland in, I guess, the fall, like
Yeah.
November, late November. And again, it just grounds me
Yeah.
to put a mindset over top of as we roll things out, or what is going to be of value. So that's one, is just to make sure that as much as possible,
You're getting out in the field as much as possible.
I'm grounded in it. Our
Yeah.
team is grounded in it. Don't roll out things that not everybody can do,
Yeah.
or roll it out and adapt.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one. Two is you're really in service to those, field leaders, if I describe it that, and really partnering with them to understand what they need to be in support of their team. Right.
Yeah.
What the leader needs who's sitting in the office or working from home in like a more of a traditional office-based role compared to what somebody needs who's leading individuals who, and I can't, sorry, there's this one vision I have in my mind over and over. We were in Lloyd and we were at a rail yard, and, there's someone, their job is, 8-9 hours a day, like outside.
Yeah.
And all I can think about in that day that I was there was just like, oh my gosh. And we're sending things out on our company intranet about watch this video.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Not
tone
gonna happen.
deaf.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely works for 3,000-4,000 people of our organization, does not work for the other 5,000.
Yeah.
And what are we doing for that group? So I think it's as long as you continue to keep that in check, and that's really all we can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ask questions.
Is there a divide? Like the politically correct answer is no, and like everything's perfect and we all get each other. Is there a divide?
You mean like between like
Field
more,
and
field
HQ?
and office space?
Yeah.
I think there's just differences. I wouldn't say a divide.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I'm sure people would say, well, there's people returning to office or returning. And meanwhile, there are individuals in our field who have never had anything different except for more challenges for the last 2 years, right? Especially those that are our camp-based facilities or our offshore facilities. Like their life has been really challenging for the last 2 years. They've been masked the whole time. They've
Protocols have changed.
protocols were just at different times up and down. So I think those can lead to not frustrations. Yes, frustrations, but some animosity, right?
Yeah.
Where people are like, oh, you're frustrated that, you now can't work from home 5 days a week. Meanwhile, I've been in this environment the whole time. So they're different roles, they're different locations, they're all different. And it's not about one versus the other.
Yeah.
And I think it's how do we make, whether you are a field-based employee in Newfoundland, Alberta, office, but like what can we do to maximize your experience in the best way possible?
Yeah.
What are the priorities for that? And that's kind of not all we can do, but I think that's a great starting point for what we can do, as opposed to office gets this, field gets this.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So my ground rule on our team that I'll say if we're rolling something out is design it for the most challenging environment. So if you're designing it for an operator on a platform in Newfoundland and it works, awesome. Then we know everybody else is going to work everywhere else.
Yeah. I like that principle a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Is the merger completing? Is it coming to conclusions? Is it getting settled?
It is. It's exciting, actually. So after this, I'm in a different team meeting this afternoon. But so we, from an HR integration, and we held, there's all sorts of integration streams that have been running. But I will tell you that we held a big chunk of them.
Yeah, HR did.
HR and IT.
Yeah.
So from the HR integration streams, they're almost all complete, which is a huge
pretty cool
piece, with the exception of the ones that are tied to the IT integration.
Yeah.
And that has a huge mammoth, July 5th, 2022, we will integrate our systems.
Okay.
And so that is, I think, kind of just this magic day everybody's got built in there.
Yeah.
So we're really working to that date right now. There'll be all sorts of things after that have, kind of continue to improve, but for the most part, we're done. We're now just waiting on that to implement.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on leading teams through such dramatic change.
Yeah, thank you.
And changing, keeping well throughout the process.
Yep.
That's been a huge win, I think, for so many leaders. And thanks for joining us on the show. I think our listeners will benefit from hearing, in particular, how you've tripled and how you've still stayed grounded to the values and what you've done there. Because there's a lot of machinations, and you leading large teams to do that's very impressive. So thanks for sharing all that with us.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome.